tonight, Brendan is going to have a chat with Tom Meaney. Now, Tom Meaney, a farmer, retired, born on the 11th of August 1931, lived at Goranduff Mill Street and moved to Rathrow the 12th of October 1939. In youth, he was much involved in outdoor pursuits, Gaelic football with Dromtariff and O'Hallow, and hurling with Dromtariff Mill Street and Bantier, athletics, Mill Street Athletic Club. Fianna Fáil TD made Cork in 1965 to 1969 and Cork North West 1969 to 1982, and he was spokesman on Defence 1973, Minister of State at Department of Industry, Commerce and Tourism 1980 and 1981, Cork County Council 1970 and 1977. He was the first Minister of State, or Minister from the South, to meet his counterpart in the North, to set up North-South initiatives to promote tourism on a North-South basis. While Minister of State, succeeded in having many industries set up in Cork City and County. 2 international factories came to Mill Street, Apple and Molex. In 1969, he led a campaign to have community schools established in Mill Street and Ballincollig, and a comprehensive school in Boherbue. Local voluntary organisations were very supportive. He led the campaign with local support to get rid of legal impediment so that military lands at Ballincollig became available for development, sanctioned by Jerry Cronin, Minister for Defence. On retiring as a TD in 1982, he became very involved in local affairs such as Mill Street Community Enterprises. Also a member of Cork Cooperative Marts in 1989 to 2001 and chairman in 1996 to 2001. Now over to you, Brendan, and I hope you enjoyed this interview.
Fáilte isteach, agus tá míad anseo I dig an ír TD Tachtadála Tom Meaney, who's a Rathrow in Achilishradi Villan, Timple Coig Vila on Bala Amach. Tom Meaney has welcomed us into his home today for this interview, and those of us who can cast our minds back over the years will remember how well Tom represented the constituency here, the people of Mid-Cork in the first instance, and now later the people of Cork Northwest. Tom has now retired from the Dáil. Tom, you're welcome to LTV1.
Thank you very much.
Tom, your family goes back quite a long way in politics and in the local community, but not always here in Rathrow. Your family was at the other side of Mill Street, nearer to Macroom, I think, originally.
Yes, that is correct, Brendan. First of all, I'd like to congratulate LTV1. I wish them the best of luck. They're doing great work, and it's right that we should know what our history was, because future generations are depending on us for to record from people who are now alive, and we miss so much in the past, is that we have to record as much as possible now. I congratulate them. Yes, my family would come very much from the Macroom area. My mother, Nora McSweeney, was one of the McSweeneys of Gurtner-Finch in the Ballyvourne area. Very strong Republican family, who in the War of Independence, Tom Barry had his headquarters there for a long time. Leslie DeBarra was also, Leslie Van DeBarra, she was also a visitor to their home. Thus they were very strong Republicans. My father's people, my mother's people would be O'Connors as well from her mother's side. Thus they'd be very, popular name around Macroom area as well. My father, then there would be Meaneys, and his mother was Kelleher. The Meaneys would be very well known in the Clonderhood area. There were many Meaney families there, coming into Mill Street and maybe back to Crailkill. And from the Kelleher family then, they would be living mainly in Munifluch. And my grandmother, my father's father, she lived to be 104 years. She was born in 1855. She died in 1959. a long time. And she used to speak about her grandmother, who was born in 1775 and died in 1870. So it's not a long link for a few centuries when you can say you were speaking to somebody who knew somebody that was born in 1775.
And that was the year Daniel O'Connell was born.
That is the year that Daniel O'Connell was born. And
Yes.
as you raised that very question, where was Daniel O'Connell born? Yes, that is, and Shanachlas Tuhala, 1987, says he was born in the old house from where we are here today in Raru, because they say that his mother was visiting the Carters, landlords outside Mallow, who were cousins of the O'Connells, and as she came across what would be now the Mallow-Killarney Road, she went into labour. She was going to Derrynane, or wherever she was, to give birth to Daniel O'Connell, and that she was rushed to the local landlord's house, who happened to be the McCarthy's.
Well, isn't that an extraordinary...
I don't know, will I put up a monument or not, or will I have to cross the border for money to do it? But however, that is part of the folklore of this area.
Yes.
But to go back again, the Kelleher's in the White Boys of 1822, in that infamous day in Cork when there were 34 sentenced to death, he was one of that 34, Diarmuid Kelleher. And we never know whether the sentence was carried out or not. We know how many were hanged in Carriganime, because the monument is there to them, but we so far have traced exactly what happened to the rest of them, because sometimes they were commuted if the parish was a good behaviour, etc., etc. Thus it was handed down, and my father then, they came to live in Grandu where they bought that farm. My grandmother getting married to a Tom Meaney, Margaret Kelleher. She was born in 1855, and she was teaching as a monitor in Munafluk School about the year 1870 or 71. And she was considered a very wealthy lady, she always said, because she was earning £1 a month.
Well.
That was very big money at that stage. She was a woman that had ill health. Amazing thing to say, and aside, at 56 years of age, she had to retire with ill health and lived to be 104.
My goodness.
But I don't know, but my father then was in Grandove. He came to live there at the turn of the century, 1906, being born in 1890. And in Mill Street, he was not there long when he joined the IRB, the Republican Brotherhood.
Yes, of course, and this is when the country was hotting up towards the 1916.
That was hotting up, and they were founded, I think, about 1865 or thereabouts. And they were proscribed by both church and state. Thus there were some other members in Mill Street as well, and very good men they were too. Thus he had very strong Republican ideas. And when the volunteers started to organise, he became an organiser for the volunteers, himself and many others in Mill Street. There were a lot of great people there. And they organised very hard, and he took part in many ambushes. And many, I can tell you, that they suffered, those men. We only hear of a few names. We should always think of the men and women that are never mentioned. And then when the Civil War broke out, he took the Republican side.
Sorry, Tom, just before you hit the Civil War there, just tell me about there was conscription, wasn't there, at that time?
There was conscription, yes, and there were many meetings on conscription.
Yes.
And the main person that would be doing this area around here, covering the area, was a Captain Crosby.
Yes.
Now, he was a man, if you like, he believed in what he said. For as far as I know, he went abroad after himself, and he died of his wounds fighting in France, as far as I know. He was in Mill Street. But the turning point in Mill Street was when Terence McSweeney was appointed to organise the volunteers in Cork County. And the 1st of November of 1915 was a very big day in Mill Street. At that time they were recruiting to join the British Army, and the volunteers took them on as well and paraded at another end of the town. So there was terrible tension there, I don't have to tell you.
So at one end of the town you had the volunteers demonstrating, as was against conscription.
That's right.
And the British Army at the other end of the town.
That is right, yes.
Conscripting the people.
Yeah, actually they were at either ends of the square at one occasion.
Yes.
But that was 1915, and that was people then, you see, were afraid to get involved in the rising, because they would tell their children, look, what is the point in it? People before you rose up, they were all killed, they were executed. And also was because in many areas previous to 1916 especially, the Catholic Church was very much against anybody revolting at what they said was the lawful authority of the land.
Yes.
You were that very much there.
Yes, yes. So then afterwards, of course, 1916 happened and everything changed after 1916.
Everything changed after 1916, and then you had the 1918 elections where they were all involved. And, well, you see, with the national, when we go back to 1916 and 14, we have to bear in mind that the national volunteers were in the majority. The Irish volunteers were very small, because previous to the break after Redmond's speech there were 180,000 approximately in the national volunteers, and after it there were no more than 14 or 16,000 left in the Irish volunteers.
Yeah, it was a huge change.
It was a huge change, yes, and people were bitterly divided over it as well.
Mm-hmm.
But you see, the IRB were always working along underneath quietly, and it was very hard for the authorities to know who they were, because they hardly knew who they were themselves.
Yeah, and your family now would have been very deeply involved in the feelings that were running around all that at the time.
They were, yeah. My father
activities
would have been the man, and I suppose going back to the Keller man in 1822, who was with the white boys.
Yes.
But I suppose somebody said one time about him is that breed of my line, they were very, shall I use the wrong word in Irish, they were very tuckaluk, they were very stubborn.
Yes, yes,
yes.
yes.
People. And, but then, unfortunately, the Civil War came and he was on the Republican side, and he got sick of on the run, and he was at home when he was arrested. Probably somebody told that he was there, and he was imprisoned, and he went on hunger strike for some time, not for, I think it was 9 or 13 days,
yes.
Which was a lot of us without food, and they thought that was not the right road to go, so he then went off the hunger strike, and he was released after 9 months and went back farming.
Well, where was he interred during the hunger strike?
He went out in Tin Town.
In Tin Town?
Yeah, that's
yeah.
It.
Yeah. And he went back farming then after
he
that.
Did, yes.
And had the family moved here to this
The
farm?
family at that stage were living to live in Groundoof, where they bought their sisters there as well, and his father and mother were there.
Yeah. And when you say the family was involved now, was it not only your father, but would his sisters and his parents?
There would not be so much, because at that time, when a boy got involved, he was on the run, and there was nobody to run the farm.
Yes.
And it was left to the sister or sisters or somebody at home to stay after the cattle.
Yes.
Thus you rarely had the woman on the run. And strange thing at that period as well, there was a priest in Milsey by the name of Father Brien, who was an active member of the volunteers.
Is that right?
Yeah, that is right.
So of course they were looking out for each other and helping each other, giving a nod and a wink, I suppose, too.
That is correct.
In many ways.
Correct. Yes, that is correct.
So that took your father then into the Civil War and out the other side of it,
yeah.
and then back home farming again.
That's right.
Now, during the 30s then, of course, you had the economic war. And
well, 1928 changed his whole life.
Mm-hmm.
He was visiting some friends one evening, on a bicycle, I don't have to tell you, and there was a Fianna Fáil convention held in Cantor. Mm-hmm. And though he was not present, he was selected to contest the local elections. Mm-hmm. And he was successful, and he was successful at every election until he died in September 1970.
Yes.
42 years.
Just give me a sense, Tom, when you were growing up at home now, and your father was kind of had been involved at that stage, what did you think of things in the house as youngsters? What did you think of your father and his...
An only child as such, being a very strong Republican family, and you see, the 30s were a bitter time in politics.
Yes.
Because at that time, which is never written, in the farming world, if you were a very strong politician, probably in you know, and you had a thrashing if you were a farmer, the other side may not compute thrashing at all.
Yes.
Just that would be all one side. It was as extreme as that, really.
And that worked both ways.
Well, that's what I said, both ways, you see. Yeah,
yes.
That is right, yeah.
Yeah. So you'd be conscious of that, really, as a young lad growing up.
Very conscious of that, yeah. There were other problems there at that time, and things did happen that I don't think we should discuss at all.
No. But it's interesting, I suppose, the sort of turmoil that must have been there, because, of course, there was no money in the country.
There was no money in the country, and there was the economic war.
Yes.
You see, that was there as well. And then you were either for or against De Valera. Mm-hmm. You know what it is.
Yeah, so
you either loved him or hated him,
yes.
one way or another, you see.
Yes.
Times were very hard.
Yes. So moving in then to of course, the war years then brought their own problems for
the
people.
The war years brought
their
own problems. He was a TD elected in 1937, and 77 TD at that stage, and in 1938 lost his seat in 43. but got re-elected in 1961. That was a big gap for to make up.
It wasn't
When
it,
at that
yeah.
stage he was 70 years of age.
Yeah. What do you remember now of that election time around his first election to the Dáil?
I remember it to be as a child, only 6 years in Grandove, and to hear all the count going on, and my father, he just come home and hear them all saying the count isn't over at all yet, they have to go back again tomorrow.
Yes.
And I think it was tomorrow they went. We had no telephone,
Yes.
no mobile phone, we had no radio.
Yes.
And we got word from a neighbour's house, the Jacksie and the Hennies of Cockhill. It was there that we got the word that he was elected.
Yes.
So they had the wet batteries,
Yes.
if you remember.
Yeah, for the radio.
Yes,
of course,
correct,
at the
yeah.
time, and they had to take them into town to have them
That's
charged.
right. And I remember then when he was beaten in 43, it was a kind of a shame to see, like. But then we had moved to Dernagree, and you know, you'd be awful because your father was beaten, and we're going to Master Funny Sunday and a pony and trap and all that. But that was all part of life. Then he went for the Senate at that stage, and it was quite humorous. The electoral vote that time, the College of Voters for the Senate that time, no county council had a vote. It was only sitting TDs, I think outgoing senators had. And there were people got elected who got 2 votes. They were so scarce. And then when people got eliminated, they built up a limit. The quota would be probably around 8. Yeah. But anyhow, my father got no vote after all his canvassing and all.
Yes.
And some months later, he met a man from the Midlands at another function he was at, and he said to him, Con, you were a lucky man. He said, you got no vote.
Yes.
But my father said, that is no boast. Well, I got 1 vote, he said. And I'm telling you, I tell all that electoral college what I taught him, he said, but I might be attacking the wrong man. You can do it, he said, can't you got no one.
Yes, yes.
You're under no compliment.
Yeah.
You know.
So, when your father went off to the Dáil after the first election, at that stage you were still a young lad at home. And I suppose he had to be away from home a lot from that on, did he?
Yes, he was away from home a lot. And I remember, well, when I think of today, and there's very big money involved in politics now, TDs in the 30s, as far as I can ascertain, there was uproar in the country when they got an increase in their allowances to £365 per annum roughly. They considered it was £1 a day. Their expenses were very tight. If you had travelled by railway, which the most of them did from this part of the country, you got your ticket at the station. The collector came on in the train and collected it, and he broke it in 2 and left you half the ticket. Now you had to produce that half ticket to be paid your expenses, to be refunded the cost of the train fare to Dublin. It's a big change the way the world has advanced since.
And especially now.
Yeah. Now at that stage, we have to be honest, a lot of people, a lot of TDs were idealists. They were not for money one way or another, and a lot of them died in debt. Their families had to carry heavy burdens. And another point I would like to make is that at that stage there was no such thing as running a deficit budget. And that's, I think, a tribute to the men of all sides and the women who wouldn't have got the education that we got in later years. But it was nearly a sin that time for to raise money for anything if we could avoid it at all. And the state didn't raise it either. The war was a very hard time. If you were a TD in a council, then you were also away on a Monday at council meetings. You would be a member of the Kerry Health Board, long before the Southern Health Board and the HGSE came in, and many other bodies. And we were at that time supplying milk to Mill Street Town. And it would be always my mother who would collect the money for the milk on a Monday. Thus, you would have 2 or 3 men working, trying to keep going the best you could. Thus, there were hard times.
Yeah, but was he, when he went to the Dáil, he was away all the week, I suppose?
They'd be away all the week, because then trains were slower that time as well.
Yes.
You know, now.
It was a day's journey to Dublin.
And they would travel a lot on bikes, cars in after the warriors, you see, they got a special allowance, not much,
yes,
for carrying out their duties. Thus, like, they all have meetings now. I don't know, do they have many meetings anyway? But to communicate with the people, I learned a lesson when I went to the Dáil myself. For an old man there, and he was a grand character, I was. He was there in the war of independence and all that. And I won't mention the part of the country he came from, but he had very bad writing. And one day in the library, another TD spotted his very bad writing. And he said to him, gosh, he said, there isn't a one in the world, he said, will be able to read that letter with your bad writing. But he said, I'm writing and that is a purpose, he said. I'm after doing a very good job for that woman in that area, he said. And she won't be able to read it either, and she'll have to bring in the neighbours, he said, and they'll all know that I'm working for them.
Well, good.
So that was a way ahead of the flyers.
Yes, and the times they were in it. So your father stayed in it all then, Tom, until what year?
43, you see.
43, and then he had a break until 61 again.
Yes, well, he was in the county council, and he was the first chairman of the agricultural bodies of the committees of agriculture.
Is that, yeah?
Yeah, committees of agriculture. Every council that time would be, I think, almost them anyway, the most of them, they would be on the committee of agriculture.
Did he contest elections at all in between?
He did. He contested, was it 3 elections, and he was in a way here that his average vote would be 4,000 and something, and he would be depending on, it was always the late Sean Milan's transfers to be elected.
Yes.
You know what I mean now.
Yes. So it was 1961 when he went back in again.
Yeah, with Sean McCarthy. That was the late Con Murphy's uncle.
Oh, yes.
The GAA.
The GAA man,
president,
at the time. So what about yourself now? When did you start your interest in active politics, we'll say?
I would be partly involved, not very involved, I would be partially involved in helping out a bit with my father. And then 1965, I decided the week before when he was retiring that I would go to convention, and got nominated and got elected. It was there was a by-election in April of 1965 to fill the vacancy when Dan Desmond died, and Eileen Desmond succeeded him, and she was an excellent parliamentarian, I can tell you that. Lots of mercy in her soul, she was a great woman.
Yeah, she was elected for Labour.
She was, and she was very good.
Yeah.
Thus, my memory serves me right now to go back to 65, she was elected, Fleur Crowley was elected, Donald Creed and myself, you see. And I think of all the people in those elections in Mid-Cork and the election after that, Donald Creed and myself for election, and the rest of them nearly all did. Fleur Crowley is dead, Eileen Desmond is dead, Dennis J. O'Sullivan is dead, Phil Burton stood with us, he's dead, Bob Donegan went one time, he's dead, Paddy Ford is dead, Jane Fitzgerald is dead.
So yourself and Donald are keeping the flag flying.
We are. I don't know whether it's the Lord gave us a long life for what purpose. I don't know. Maybe it is a chance to repent.
I'm sure you haven't much to repent about, Tom.
I don't know.
At this stage. So anyway, you're in the Dáil now at this stage, and you're a young fella up there in Dublin. I suppose it was awesome, was it?
It was awesome, yes. It was awesome to think that you were in the chamber, It was.
Can you remember your first day?
I do well, and I remember the first day and meeting Sean Lee Mess and meeting all the others. TTs a lot. There were a lot of older men that time in the Dáil, and most of them are survivors of the Civil War and had been there in 1965.
Yeah.
Letter writing problems were not near as much as later. It was an easier Dáil. It was really a part-time Dáil, if you like, a part-time job with ministers and parliamentary secretaries at him, they were known.
Yes.
They were known as. And of course I always remember first to meet Des Foley, who I adored as a footballer and hurler.
Yes.
You know.
Yes.
And it was fairly frightening, to be honest with you, and you'll be afraid nearly to move left and right at that stage. But you'll get your feet after a while. And the late Niall Blaney, I remember well, Jolly Cronin and myself, he gave us great advice. And the advice was very simple for politicians always. Never try to carry your problems to bed with you, because you are no good the following day.
Yes.
You're too tired, you're worn out from thinking.
Yes.
You have to wake up every morning, especially, he said, at ministerial level, with a clear brain.
Yes.
And I think it was excellent advice.
And some of the TDs, I'll bet that you met, weren't able to take that advice, were they?
No, some would be natural warriors.
Yes.
And he always said, learn as much as possible to speak off the cuff. Very important, much more impressive. Really.
Tell me now, what were the great events of your time in the Dáil?
Well, there was a lot of trouble with 69 on, internment in the north. As a matter of fact, you see, poor Paddy Ford, the Lord to mercy him, in the by-election when Jane Fitz was elected in 1972 in the early days of August, there was a Fianna Fáil rally in Mill City Sunday night before. And internment was coming in the north that time, and Jacqueline summoned all his ministers, and there was a cabinet meeting held in Milstead Garda Station, which I suppose is the kind of a thing we forget now, but it was such a big thing to happen, and it is a big thing in history, to imagine there was a cabinet meeting there, and he had his own private information what was happening up north and all that, you see. Thus, the northern question was always there. Now, I remember then, the arms trial came up. We were in London on an inter-parliamentary grouping, staying in Grosvenor House, where you would be entertained by the British parliamentarians at very high level cost, I'd say to them, because it was an excellent hotel. And we were summoned home, and we saw there where various ministers were sacked. And that was further turmoil in the country and in the party. And I had become assistant whip. And then O'Malley, Desi was the chief whip. Cunningham was assistant whip as well. Desi became Minister for Justice. And Cunningham, coming from the same constituency as Niall Blaney, couldn't act with him. So I was given to deal with and to interact with Niall T. Blaney, Charles Haughey, Des Foley, Sean Sherwin, Podge Brennan, and Kevin Boland. Yes. Now Kevin Boland took a very hard line, and when I approached him, he would not listen to my proposals. And my proposals were simple as assistant whip. I said, if you don't vote, or if you vote against the government, we'll have a general election, and that is your right to do. But I will, if you decide to vote for the government, tell you every week when I go to the Dublin on Tuesday what the business of the week is and when there are likely to be votes. If there are snap votes coming up, I would like to have your private telephone numbers, all of you. And they said, right, that they would work on that system. And we worked together great. We became great friends, actually. And never once did they let me down when I told them there was a vote coming. And when my time passed there, I got all those private slips of paper, I tore them up and burned them.
My goodness. But that arms trial at the time, of course, there was a lot of tension around it, wasn't there?
There was a lot of tension, but a large amount of Irish people were very sympathetic to the nationalists of the North, because they were thinking of the pogrom of 1916, and now in 1969 they were also thinking of nationalists being burned out of their homes. And I don't want to get internationally involved one way or another, but I thought myself that the British government was not listening to the Irish government. They made several proposals to ease that situation there. Then you had the civil rights movement in the North, and they were battened into the ground. Thus I always think, if they gave something to the nationalists, the provisional IRA would never be born. The people then went anyone and everyone. Now, I'll say something, of course, that people may not agree with, and that is, there were a lot of arms, some may be outdated, who were still in Ireland from the 1921 period, and they were nearly all collected and went north in 1969.
Right.
Thus, even that the Dáil was debated and saying the arms trial and what happened shouldn't have taken place, the people as such had a huge sympathy for the people in Northern Ireland, because most Irish people, if you listen to them, they believe in the proclamation of 1916. Equal rights, everybody to have their own religion and their own viewpoint, and to respect the next person's viewpoint, and to have a democratic system.
Yeah, but at the time, I suppose the news bulletins of the day and the newspapers of the day would have told us or suggested that there was a serious proposal or possibility that Charlie Haughey in particular would have sent the army into the north. Was that real, or was it just speculation?
Well, it was for speculation and otherwise, and there was the arms trial, and the very fact that I was very close to Jack Lynch.
Yes. Every
day through all that, and could write a lot about it.
Yes.
And he was actually, Fianna Fáil were lucky to have him, if you like, when he became Taoiseach.
Yes.
Because the people were always saying, what would Fianna Fáil do when they had somebody leader who was not involved in the Civil War?
Yes.
And they were very looking for to get Jack Lynch. Thus, there were lots of things I saw around me that I don't comment on.
Yes.
And that's not for to say anything nasty against them one way or another.
Yes, of course.
But you'd be often thinking, you see, there were lots of people thought that was the right thing to do.
Yes.
But then again, if you look at it, what army had we?
Yes.
You know, we had a very small army. And the point is, the United Nations were not willing to come to our help. That was the big problem, really, in my book, you see.
Yeah. So, and of course, the civil rights thing then was a major worry, I have no doubt, in the world for our government, even down here.
What was the major worry? And also a major worry would the be specials.
Yes.
The They were a very big worry, and the way they were behaving in the north. And gerrymandering. You have to realise at that stage, as far as I can recall, there was only one MP going to Parliament from the north, and that was Eddie McAteer. Was he not elected from Derry? Because gerrymandering was made in such a way that the Nationalists could not get anybody elected in West Belfast.
Yeah, it was an extraordinary move up there. Did you go to the north yourself, Tom, and see what was going on
When I
there?
was Minister of State, I was the first senior, if you like, I won't call myself senior, for I wasn't senior Minister of State, on tourism to cross the border to meet my opposite number in the north.
Yes, that's right.
I was the first, actually, and it was very heavy guard crossing the border. You were met, the state car driver of all the ministers that time once I crossed the border. The detective was with you. His arms were taken off him. You were then at the mercy of the RUC, who were very good, and you would probably finish with a helicopter over you all the way into Belfast. You know, and I remember, I was in one point as well.
And how were you actually received then at meetings there?
Well, you'd be received officially very well. You would, yes. And there were a lot of people, unionist people there, that wanted it to come to an end. They wanted us to understand each other.
Yes.
And you would get a message to take back. Look, from official people, I want to mention some. Look, would you tell your people, don't say anything wrong. We want this to come to an end. Let us all come together.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah. So
there were the other extreme unionists who would not listen to that.
But at what kind of business were you involved? Was it tourism business?
It was tourism, crossing the border, setting up tourism and selling tourism on either side of the border, selling it as a one unit.
Yeah.
And I remember well walking at one point with the secretary in the north, and the two was to walk up through the town, and bear in mind there was only one hotel that time that had not been bombed in that area.
Yeah.
And and a thought struck into my head, the Secretary of State, that supposing a sniper from the prison area took a pot shot at him and missed him, so probably I'd get shot by accident.
yeah.
But the thoughts that into your
course, yeah.
But anyway, it has come to an end, thanks be to God.
Yeah, and of course things got worse and worse in the north then, and you were still up there in the
There
Dáil
were
trying to
3 or
cope with
4
that.
visits there, and I wouldn't like to make any more of them. It was fairly harrowing crossing it to
I
me.
bet you it was, yeah.
But we were very well received wherever we went.
Yeah.
Very
Was
well.
Bobby Sands on hunger strike at the time you were there now?
He was. His hunger strike started when we were doing London. We were doing all the radio stations, moreover selling to hotels. What would happen is a group would go in. When happening today now, you just think of it, and they pick out whatever minister the day was responsible. If it was industry, if it was something else, the minister go up with the group, because very few countries at that time were sending ministers. And England, the English people would tell you, wouldn't it be nice if someone who was politically responsible would come along as well?
Yes. Yeah. So you'd be at those meetings and those
occasions. We got a great receptions, and I remember Manchester well. We were with the City Council, and we were with what we would call the County Council, and that night then they gave a dinner for us. The ladies originally came from Clare. She was the Lord Mayor at the time, and what would I call it? Her sister then was help here as well. And as the night went on anyway, in the Grand Hotel, a message was received in the hotel that if she did not take down the tricolour, the hotel would be blown up. So this was at the top table, and there was a quick decision had to be made. So she sent a little note back. I have distinguished visitors. The tricolour stays up. So those around, the word I suppose went around, and people didn't know whether they'd get indigestion or be blown to bits.
I know.
But nothing happened anyway, thank God.
Yeah, it would have been difficult enough to hang a Union Jack now, mind you, in Dublin during those times, I'd imagine.
It would. It would be very hard, yes.
Yeah, there would have been a lot of feeling around that kind of thing, I imagine. Talk to me about Tom Meaney, the men above around the Dáil, and the interaction with the other politicians, particularly, say, the opposition. Is there a cordial, friendly kind of atmosphere for fellas who never went into the Dáil?
Well, you see, when you go into the Dáil, you should maintain your point. If you believe in it very strong, the other person will be the very opposite to you. But that doesn't stop you from interacting or socially mixing with that person.
Yes.
Now, no matter what party you're in, there are nice people to interact with, and there are people you just don't want to interact with. Right. No matter what party you're in.
Yes.
You'll see.
Yes.
But we got on very well in Cork, actually, because had many delegations. we'd have across the board political deputations. The TDs of all parties would go together for the good of the people.
Yes, yes. Tom, I know that your father was in the chamber, and I'm going back a little bit here, when John F. Kennedy came to Ireland.
Oh, yes.
Tell me, he must have been very conscious of the historical moment that it was.
God, sure, he was very historic, and my father and mother, and that June day they went off to Dublin to meet him, and the tension was mighty, and we had RT that time for about a couple of years, isn't that right?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, and we were watching it here at home, because I got married, Joan and myself got married in June of 62, and thus I think Nori was born at the time, a baby, but still we were watching it here, and it was great for the nation.
Yes.
It was great for everyone, really.
Yeah, there was a great feeling about it at the time, I suppose, in every household in Ireland.
There was a mighty buzz that someone of Irish extraction had been President of the United States.
Yes.
And that they came to visit where their ancestors came out from their humble homes in many years gone by.
Yeah, and this is the interesting thing about it, that they took pride in the humble homes rather than being ashamed of the humble homes.
They took pride in them.
And
that was a great thing.
Now, coming back now to your own constituency, because you started, we'll say it was mid-Cork at that time.
Yeah.
The boundaries, I suppose, changed then when Cork North West was created.
That is right, that was in 1969.
Yeah. What difference did that make to you and to your voting base?
Well, it made a big difference, because when I went first, and when my father went in 61, Newmarket was in Cork North, Kanturk was in Cork North. And after, when it became Cork North West, we went as far as Ballyhay and Charleville. Mm-hmm. Whereas when I went in 1965, my father in 61, we had down as far as Blackrock and Cork. Mm-hmm. We had Courtmacsherry and Timoleague. We also had Bandon. Mm-hmm. And thus we were fighting from a small area here. Mm-hmm. And I remember the Cork suburbs to be canvassing it, and St. Finbarr's, the J Club there were in it. I think I got 500 votes there because people helped me. It was great for a lad coming from so far away. But
absolutely.
Your friends that country people will back you now. They'll be talking about who belonged to you when I left the area, and you'll get votes.
But you didn't have the communications that you have today. You didn't have the television to the same extent, because people didn't buy into it, I suppose.
They did not buy into it. Exactly. It was very strange. They said one time a good television appearance, our first television appearance when television came in, they said was worth 500 votes. Because it was also new to the people. Now, it could be our downfall now.
Yes,
you know what I mean?
Yes. So, kind of ministering, as it were, to the constituents, they must have been making a blue track to the door and getting all their problems solved. And how did you deal with that kind of demand?
You see, I always thought when I entered politics that a public representative, right, legislation, and also a buffer between democracy and the local people. Yes. The local people had a problem, and democracy had the institutions of the state, and I'm talking about. And if they refuse something to a person, they will come to you. You should find out, did they fill the form right, or was there a mistake made in the office? And then you would try to pursue it.
Yes.
And my greatest things were to fight for industries, and were looking to bring them when I was Minister for State, and the community and comprehensive schools that in Mill Street and Borbeen places, they moved from being, and as well in Ballincollig,
yes,
they moved from being 43rd in the list to up to 6th, because there was a row about them, whether they should be or not. A lot of vested interest did not want them.
Yes.
In the schooling that time. Yes. And it was obvious to me and to others that the Mill Street and Borbeen, that area did not get them, is that they would never get them later, because they were too small maybe.
Yes.
Thus in the 1970s it was vital that they get him.
So was that lobbying, I suppose, and campaigning was done at national level, was it?
That was done at national level, yeah. George Colley and Padraig Faulkner, yeah.
Yeah. But if you take the peoples, for instance, living around you here in the farming community, and that, you would have known all those people very well, and they would have known you.
Well, I'd have grown up with them, and I'd have played football in the area and hurling and all that, in athletics, and that time we'd been involved in coursing and all outdoor pursuits, shooting and all that, you see, and they would know you, and the young people give you their personal vote. But the older people may change personally, or they may not, because 65 was only 40 odd years, or 30 odd years, after the Civil War, and they would still have very hard, views held about that time. But they would respect you. To any very few people would be anyway nasty. Very few indeed.
Yeah. Talk about the football. You were a footballer and a hurler, were you?
Oh, Christ, and I wasn't a bad one. But anyway, I spent about 20 years with Untitled and 7 years with Duhallow Senior, and hurled a small bit when we were sitting down here.
Yeah. Did you win anything? Were you any good?
We won a lot of junior championships and that. I remember well. I was thinking one time, being in tournaments and on football to Untitled, I appeared in the 19 finals, and we won 18 of them that time. We were very lucky if we got to the final. But we lost county finals anyway, which grieves me still, and that's it.
Tell me why that grieves you.
Well, technicalities, and we genuinely thought that we won it fair and square, and that we didn't get to them. That medal to be missing still grieves me.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, that was the sweetest medal of all, was it?
That was the sweetest medal of all, to win a county medal at any level.
Yes,
no matter whether you were young, under 14, 16 or 18,
Was the objection later on, or was it?
It was after the match, yes. Yeah, it was a prolonged thing, and to the thing I don't go into anymore, sick of it.
I know.
No.
It's strange to sit here and listen to a man who has been on the national stage and the international stage, finding himself being upset by the local...
Well, I'm not really upset. You move on from it.
You
have to move on, yes.
You do, of
right,
course.
Yeah.
I was talking to somebody yesterday, and he said to me that Tom Meaney was the ideal rural TD. Why would you say that? Why would he have said that?
Well, 'twas he said it. I was trying to be, well, I love rural Ireland, and I mean by rural Ireland, we had all small towns and villages as well, really, hadn't we? You had Mill Street, population of 14, 15, Muckrow maybe population that had 2100, Charlwood, Kanturk in between, and they were all the rural people, and rural people was losing population. The small farmer was going, and his children were going then, and you dreaded would it become a wasteland. Now, thanks be to God, that's now in the rural areas, you see, and I think O'Malley did a great service with the buses that time when he made that announcement.
You're talking about the schools, is it?
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
Because you see, collecting the children, a lot of families wouldn't be able to go. They'd have a baby at home, but they can hop on the bus near them.
They were able to take the children to school. And of course that gave an educated community then afterwards, I suppose.
It did, yes, and it was very good to the second level education.
Yes,
you see, as well.
Yeah, and of course those educated people then came back and did a great lot of good for their own community.
They did.
When they lived in it again. Looking back over all the years now, Tom, what stands out for you as being one of the great moments, or one of the great people that you met, or one of the great experiences at a human level, or on the national stage, maybe at local level? What stands out in your mind?
Well, I met some great politicians, but I was one of the greatest men I ever shook hands with Cassius Clay.
Right.
Yeah. When he came to Dublin, he had a meeting with the Taoiseach that time, and it was before his fight with Blue Lewis in Croke Park.
Yes.
And he came into the Taoiseach's office, and we ordered tea with him. And he was a huge man. He was a lovely man to speak to, and he had these huge hands. And it was amazing. You would often hear a person saying, a person, when you shake hands with them, what kind of work they're doing. People that work hard in the land, or in many things outside the land, or carpentry and all that, or blacksmiths or whatever they are, their hands would be rougher than a person who would be inside a counter. That's only natural. But he had these huge, soft hands. And I looked at his sneakers, as I thought, and I thought his feet were huge. They were definitely size 14. I thought maybe they weren't.
Yeah.
But then himself and Jack Lynch had great rapport between them. And it was a fabulous time, and the laughter we had was mighty, because he was the first Prime Minister, in his words, our Taoiseach, to have received Cassius Clay. Because you see, he had problems with the different wars that were coming up, and that he wouldn't join the army in America.
Oh, yes.
If you remember all those times.
Yes.
Yeah.
Conscientious object.
But very conscientious object.
To those
I
things,
know some great characters in the Dáil then.
Yes.
And if I were turning back the clock of history, command of the English language, I was Sean Collins, West Cork, would be one of the very best. He'd be Michael Collins' nephew.
Yes.
A larger than life man would be Donogh O'Malley.
Yes.
He
was the man that was responsible for free education.
He was, yeah, and he died so sudden. And he was larger than life anyway. Everywhere, as a man.
Was he?
He was, yeah. A great orator would be James Dillon.
Yes.
He would be an excellent orator. Then Lee Mass, quick thinker. I was always sorry that Sean Lee Mass did not get charge of Ireland earlier. He had a younger vision, if you like, even that he was an older man. And he could see that our protected industries could not hold forever. That we would put all levies to protect our industries, and he saw the wider world, the wider Europe for us.
Yes.
Now, Henry Kinney, he was one of the great characters as well of politics. And he was a lovely man. And he drove horseman. And I remember well to Henry be ill and coming down on the lift. I was in the lift coming down from the top floor, and he came in down on the next floor, and he was very unwell. We had a few words, and then as we came down along to the bottom floor, for one reason or another, Jack Lynch came in. And the two shook hands. They were two great GA stalwarts, and they both cried.
My goodness. Yeah. Well.
That to me was a very sad moment.
Well.
Yeah.
So, coming into the local constituency, Tom, there must have been people with said problems locally as well that would have been looking for solutions.
That is correct. And when we entered politics, if you like, the church was very strong in Ireland.
Yes.
But a man said to me when I entered politics, "You're a good TD," he said. If people will tell you their private problems that they won't tell to the parish priest. And it was very, very true to help them. And there was nothing better than to be able to help somebody. And I recall one person who was not involved in politics at all, and he's dead now, and he's surely went to heaven. Somebody came to me about a lady who had a problem with her children. They hadn't the best of health, and there were 5 or 6 in the family and 3 or 4 of them. Could anything be done about seeing after them? That we would do, of course, with a heart and a half. And I said, what is the history? The history, they said, is her husband would have would share the share of drink. Okay. And then he died sudden. But before he died, he had sold the farm. And after his death, the man that bought the farm came to the widow, and he said to her, he said, "You can have the land back," he says, "for yourself and your children. I don't want it," he said, "and I hope you'll be happy with it." Yeah. Now, there was no greed in that man. I don't know who the man was.
Yeah. Tremendous, generous, thoughtful gesture from that man. No doubt.
That is right.
And I presume the woman, did she hold on to her farm?
She held on, yes. I called there years after to find herself and children working around the yard, and everything was sorted in the other matter, and she was a very happy woman. I hope she's alive yet. The children are anyway.
Yes.
And I hope they're happy.
Yeah. I suppose, Tom, looking back over the years now, and looking at Ireland at the moment, at rural Ireland around you here, and looking, I suppose, at the national situation as well, the changes that have come about. Are you optimistic about the country, and are you optimistic about local communities now, or how do you view them?
I'm optimistic in many ways, because I think for some years we lost reality. We lost the run of ourselves, in other words. And money, there was no value in money. The first time I thought that people losing value for money was, I'd say in the 1970s, when I saw young people of the 20s having a drink and not counting their change. That might sound strange now, but to me, that was a terrible sin. Because I was using a young lad to make sure I counted the change, that I wasn't wrong if I had a drink. Now, as well, young children going to school, not taking change, it was a penny or a halfpenny or a cent. No mass in it, and I think we're going to get away from that again. Now, we're going to have hard times, and I would say to our politicians, common sense. I don't care who they are. And I would say as well to the politicians of today and to all them, cut their salaries more and their income. Because you don't understand the pain unless you suffer the pain. And I think that they will have enough to live on after, I'm not knocking them, there are some great people there. But we have the democratic system. I think Ireland should come from this stronger, actually. We had too much waste. Waste all over the... There was waste in the 70s too, bear in mind. I could record places where there were terrible wastes, But as I say, we're highly educated, but you often have to think have we got common sense? And another thing we're missing is wit. There was great humour there when we entered the politics first. Now everybody in the Dáil, the first change came, in 1973, 67 to 73. You will go in to hear the debates between Jim Dillon, O'Malley came up at that stage, Martin Corrie. They were the characters of the quick wit, and Blaney and those, you know. And even that they made their point, they had a lot of wit in it. Where he went into offices as well, people had a lot of wit. But there's something after coming over people. They've lost their sense of humour. I remember well as Minister of State, I just ran into my head now, to be in, I won't mention where, anyway, and we were having a very serious meeting with somebody, and the butler in this particular place was at the door, mind you, that nobody would interrupt us. And anyway, we were nearly complete, and I came out anyway, and the butler came in, then we were finished, and I just said to the butler, I said, would you ever be so kind as to show me the way to the gentleman's quarters? And, oh, right, Honourable Mr. Meaney, correct.
Yes. And
I was led down to the gentleman's quarters, and this, I say, opened the door, and led me in, he says, you are a most privileged gentleman, he says. The last person that used that toilet, he says, was Her Royal Highness the Queen of England. She was here a fortnight ago. But I'm very privileged.
I think, Tom, on that note, maybe we have a lot said, an awful lot more than we could be saying. But it occurs to me that since 1922, particularly, I suppose, and indeed long before that, the members of your family have been very conscious and very involved in the welfare of this country. Since 1920s, and up along when your father got elected then subsequently, and then you yourself getting elected and being in the Dáil, you have had a great hand in the running of the country and making the country what it is for us today. So,
just could I say, Brendan, my last words would be to people rising up is to think again of the Proclamation of 16. Respect the next person's view.
Yes.
And everybody in a democratic society are entitled to have a view. Pull with our neighbours internationally. The other times are past now, and we must look forward to work together. That doesn't say that they can have very strong nationalistic views. Some other body may have different.
Yes.
Because my father wrote his life story, and as we read it, we came to the Civil War, and there's just one page. I had a very strong view, others had another view.
And it says it all. Tom Meaney, thank you very much for talking to us today. Gurmila Mahagat.
Well, that concludes our programme for tonight. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you all again next week. In the meantime, good night. Ihawa.